Welcome back to Ocean Revenge. The story you're about to hear takes place in Seattle, Washington. My name is Nadia Osman. I'm 29 years old, a freelance photographer, and the kind of person who shows up early, delivers exactly what I promise, and treats my craft like the business it is. That's why when my best friend of 12 years asked me to photograph her wedding as a gift, I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before saying yes. Those 3 seconds of doubt were my gut screaming at me. I should have listened. The conversation happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. Rachel and I were sitting at our usual coffee shop in Capitol Hill, the one with the exposed brick walls and overpriced oat milk lattes. She had that glow people get when they're newly engaged, all sparkling eyes and constant phone checking to admire her ring. I was genuinely happy for her. Rachel had been through a string of disappointing relationships, and when she met Derek, a software engineer who actually remembered her coffee order and didn't ghost her after 3 dates, it felt like she'd finally caught a break. "So, I need to ask you something," she said, stirring her latte with that nervous energy she got when she wanted something big. "And you can totally say no if it's too much." I set down my camera, which I'd been showing her shots from a corporate event I just finished. "What's up?" She took a breath. "Would you be my maid of honor?" My chest warmed. Rachel and I had been through everything together since sophomore year at the University of Washington. Late-night study sessions, terrible breakups, her mom's cancer scare, my dad's deportation hearing. We held each other's hair back after too much tequila and held each other's hands through funerals. Of course I'd be her maid of honor. "Are you kidding?" I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I'd be honored. Literally." She beamed, then bit her lip. "There's one more thing." Here it was. The thing she was nervous about. "Would you maybe consider photographing the wedding?" she asked quickly. "As your gift to us?" "I know you're crazy busy and your work is worth so much, but Derek and I are trying to save money for the honeymoon and a down payment, and honestly, I can't imagine else capturing the day the way you would. You know me better than any stranger photographer ever could." I felt something tighten in my stomach. Not quite alarm, but close. I'd built my photography business from nothing over the last 6 years. I'd gone from shooting my roommate's terrible garage band for $50 to landing corporate clients, high-end weddings, and editorial work that actually paid my rent in one of the most expensive cities in the country. My weekend rates for weddings started at $4,500 and went up depending on hours, locations, and deliverables. Rachel's wedding was scheduled for June 14th, a Saturday. Peak wedding season. I already had an inquiry for that date from a tech exec getting married at a vineyard in Woodinville, a job that would have paid $8,000 for 8 hours of coverage plus engagement shots. But this was Rachel, my best friend. The person who sat with me emergency room at 2 in the morning when I had a panic attack during finals week. The person who'd helped me move 3 times. Who'd dog-sat my neurotic rescue mutt for 2 weeks when I went to visit family. Who knew my coffee order and my childhood traumas and the password to my Netflix account. Of course, I heard myself say. "I'd love to." Her face lit up like I just handed her a lottery ticket. "Oh my God, seriously? Nadia, you're the best. I promise we'll make it so easy for you. Just like candid stuff. Nothing crazy formal. Just capture the moments, you know." I smiled, ignoring the small voice in my head that whispered you just gave away $8,000 in a Saturday in June you'll never get back. That was mistake number 1. Over the next 2 months, I threw myself into maid of honor duties with the same energy I brought to my paid work. I organized the bridal shower at a cute bistro in Fremont, splitting the $600 bill with 2 other bridesmaids who complained the whole time about the cost. I planned the bachelorette weekend in Portland, booking the Airbnb, coordinating transportation, and making dinner reservations while Rachel floated through it all like a guest at her own party. I attended 4 dress fittings, gave feedback on invitations, and spent hours on the phone with her talking through seating charts and family drama. I also started preparing for the wedding shoot itself. I scouted the venue, a beautiful barn-style event space in Snohomish County with string lights and endless rustic charm. I made shot lists, planned timelines, and coordinated with the venue coordinator about lighting and access. I cleared my entire weekend, turning down 2 smaller gigs that would have brought in $3,200 combined, because Rachel wanted me available for the rehearsal dinner on Friday night. When the tech exec from Woodinville reached out again, this time offering $8,500 if I could make it work, I stared at the email for a full 10 minutes. Then I wrote back, "I'm so sorry, but I have a commitment that weekend that I can't move. I'd love to work with you in the future." I hit send and felt like I'd just thrown money into Puget Sound. But it was fine. It was for Rachel. That's what friends did. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was editing photos at my desk in my tiny studio apartment in Ballard when my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Hey, can we talk? Call me when you get a chance." I dialed immediately. "What's up? Everything okay?" There was a pause, the kind that lasts half a second, but feels like an hour. "Yeah, everything's fine," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I just wanted to give you a heads up about something so it's not weird." My stomach dropped. "Okay. So Derek's aunt offered to pay for a professional photographer as a wedding gift," she said quickly. "Like a really established one. Claire Donovan. She shot for magazines and everything." My throat felt tight. "So you don't need me to shoot it anymore, right? But like I said, it actually works out better this way. You were doing it as a favor anyway, and now you don't have to." She laughed, light and easy. "You should be relieved." I wasn't relieved. I was staring at the inquiry email I'd turned down, the one that would have paid me more than my rent for 3 months. I thought about the bridal shower I'd paid for, the bachelorette weekend I'd organized, the 4 fittings I'd attended, the hours I'd spent scouting and planning and preparing. "When did you decide this?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Oh, like a week ago," she said. His aunt just offered out of nowhere. It felt rude to say no. A week ago. She'd known for a week and was just now telling me. 2 weeks before the wedding. "Does this photographer know the timeline I built?" I asked. "The shot list?" Rachel hesitated. I can send it to her if you want. But honestly, she's super experienced. I'm sure she has her own system." "Right," I said. "Of course. You're okay with this, right?" Rachel asked, and for the first time, I heard a thread of uncertainty. "I mean, it's not like you were charging us anyway." "It's just a wedding, Nadia. It's just a wedding." The words landed like a slap. Just a wedding. As if the $8,000 I'd turned down was just pocket change. As if the weekends I'd spent planning and prepping were just idle time I had lying around. As if my work, my skill, my entire career was just a hobby I did for fun. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's fine." "Oh, good," she said, exhaling. "I knew you'd get it. You're the best, Nadia. Seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time. The late afternoon sun slanted through my window, dust motes floating in the light. My dog, Cisco, a scruffy terrier mixed with anxiety issues, padded over and rested his chin on my knee, sensing something was wrong. I pulled up my work calendar and stared at June 14th, the day I'd blocked off completely. The day I'd turned down $8,500 for. The day that was now just an empty square on my screen. Then I opened my messages and scrolled back through my conversation with Rachel. There it was from 2 months ago. Her exact words, "Would you maybe consider photographing the wedding as your gift to us?" Not, "Would you be interested in shooting our wedding and we'll pay you fairly?" Not, "Can we hire you as our photographer as your gift?" I screenshotted the message. I didn't know why yet. I just did. Over the next few days, something strange started happening. I'd run into mutual friends, people who were also invited to the wedding, and they'd say things like, "I heard you couldn't do Rachel's wedding photos anymore. That's too bad." Wait, couldn't? The third time it happened, I pressed for details. My friend Maya, who I'd known through Rachel, gave me a sympathetic look over drinks. "Yeah, Rachel mentioned you de-offered to shoot the wedding, but then something came up with your schedule and you had to back out. She felt bad because she'd been counting on you." My blood went cold. "She said I backed out?" Maya nodded. "She said you were really apologetic about it, but that you double booked yourself or something." I set down my beer very carefully. "That's not what happened." Maya's expression shifted from sympathetic to confused. "What do you mean?" I told her. The whole story. How Rachel had asked me to shoot the wedding as a gift. How I turned down paying work. How she called 2 weeks before to say she hired someone else and framed it like she was doing me a favor. Maya's jaw actually dropped. Are you serious? Why would I make that up? Jesus, Nadia, that's... She trailed off, clearly trying to figure out what to say. That's really messed up. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I texted 3 other people who'd mentioned the same story. Friends of Rachel's, people who'd been invited to the wedding. I asked them, casually, what they'd heard about the photography situation. All 3 of them said the same thing. Nadia had offered, then backed out. Poor Rachel had to scramble to find someone else. She'd lied. Not just to me. To everyone. She'd rewritten the story to make herself the victim, and me the unreliable flake who'd let her down. I sat on my couch that night with Cisco curled up next to me, scrolling through photos on my phone. Pictures of Rachel and me over 12 years. College parties. Road trips. Her holding my hand at my dad's deportation hearing. Me holding hers when her mom was in the hospital. Had she always been like this? Or had I just never been on the receiving end before? Before I tell you exactly what I did in response before, I explain the plan I built over the next 13 days that would change everything. Tell me this. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. Because what Rachel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent 6 years building a business on trust, reputation, and receipts. I documented everything. Every contract, every conversation, every promise. And I was about to teach my best friend of 12 years a very expensive lesson about what happens when you treat someone as work. Like it's worthless and their loyalty like it's guaranteed. The wedding was in 13 days. I had a plan. And unlike Rachel, I always delivered exactly what I promised. Have you ever watched someone you trusted rewrite history to make you the villain in a story where you were actually the one who got hurt? If so, you already know the rage that settles in when you realize the person you take a bullet for would throw you under the bus to save face. I didn't cry that night. I didn't call Rachel to confront her. I didn't post an angry rant on social media. I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it simply, Evidence. Then I got to work. The thing about friendships that last over a decade is that you accumulate a lot of history. Shared memories, inside jokes, 1,000 small moments that build into something that feels unshakable. But when you start looking at those memories through a different lens, when you stop making excuses and start seeing patterns, the foundation you thought was solid starts to look more like sand. I spent the first night after Maya's revelation going through old texts, emails, and photos. Not out of nostalgia, but like an investigator building a case. And what I found made my stomach turn. It started small. A text from 3 years ago when I'd landed my first major corporate client, a tech startup that paid me $12,000 for a full brand photography package. I'd been so excited I'd called Rachel immediately. Her response, which I'd read as supportive at the time, now felt different. That's great. Just don't let it go to your head. Remember when you were shooting for free just to build your portfolio? Stay humble. Or the time 2 years ago when I'd been featured in a local photography blog's 30 under 30 list. Rachel's comment at the brunch where I'd shared the news. I mean, it's a blog, not like National Geographic or anything. But still cool. Every accomplishment I'd shared, she'd found a way to minimize. Every struggle I'd mentioned, she'd found a way to make about herself. When I'd told her about losing a major client because they went with someone cheaper, she'd spent 20 minutes talking about how hard it was to find a good deal on her bridesmaid dresses. The pattern was there. I'd just been too close, too loyal, too convinced that best friends don't keep score to see it. But the thing that made my blood run cold was finding a group chat from 8 months ago. Rachel had accidentally added me to a conversation with 3 of her work friends before immediately removing me. But in that 30-second window before she caught her mistake, I'd seen enough. Rachel, Nadia's doing my wedding photos for free. She tried to act like it was a huge deal, but I know she doesn't have that many bookings. She needs the portfolio boost more than I need to pay her. Chelsea. LOL, that's actually smart. Free professional photos. Score. Rachel. Right? And she's so desperate to be needed that she'd do literally anything I ask. It's kind of sad but also convenient. I'd seen it at the time. I'd felt the gut punch of those words. But I'd convinced myself I'd misread it, that it was taken out of context. That Rachel would never actually think of me that way. I'd done what I always did. I'd made excuses for her because that's what best friends do. Now reading it again with clear eyes, I saw it for what it was. Rachel didn't value me. She used me. And she'd been comfortable enough with that dynamic to laugh about it with people who barely knew me. I took a screenshot, added it to the evidence folder. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot and reactive and messy. What I felt was cold, calculated, and perfectly focused. Rachel had built her wedding on my free labor and then discarded me when something better came along. Worse, she'd lied to our entire social circle to protect her image at the expense of mine. In my industry, reputation is everything. If people thought I was the kind of photographer who flaked on commitments, even personal ones, it could cost me real money. She gambled that I'd stay quiet, that I'd just swallow the humiliation and show up to her wedding with a smile because that's what I'd always done. She bet on my loyalty. She was about to learn that loyalty without respect isn't loyalty at all. It's just exploitation with better marketing. I started with the receipts. I pulled bank statements showing every expense I'd covered for wedding-related events. The bridal shower, $247, my portion after the other bridesmaids contributed. The bachelorette weekend, $680, Airbnb, my share of the rental car, the dinner I treated everyone to on the last night. The bridesmaid dress Rachel had insisted we all buy from a specific boutique, $310. Alterations, $75. Shoes that matched her specific vision, $120. The maid of honor duties alone had cost me $1,432. That didn't include the hours of unpaid labor, the emotional energy, or the opportunity cost of the jobs I'd turned down. Then there was the big one. I pulled up the email from the Woodinville client, the tech exec who'd offered $8,500 for June 14th. I declined specifically because I'd committed to Rachel's wedding. I took screenshots of the entire email chain, highlighting the dates and the dollar amount. Total documented financial impact of Rachel's request and subsequent betrayal, $9,932. I created a simple spreadsheet. Date, expense, amount, purpose, receipt. Every line item backed up with proof. At the bottom, I added one more line. Opportunity cost. Declined $8,500 wedding client for June 14th per friend's request. Then I did something that would have seemed paranoid if it hadn't turned out to be completely necessary. I went back through every text conversation Rachel and I had about the wedding. Every time she'd asked me to photograph it, every time I'd confirmed, every detail we'd discussed. I took screenshots of everything. The original honed and showed her the screenshots. The original conversation where Rachel had asked me, my acceptance, the timeline. Then the call where she'd told me she'd hired someone else. Maya read through everything, her expression shifting from confused to angry. "This is completely different from what she told me," she said. "Nadia, she straight up lied." "I know," I said. "And I need to know who else she told this story to." Over the next 3 days, I had similar conversations with 5 other people. All of them had heard some version of the same lie. Nadia flaked. Nadia double-booked. Poor Rachel had to scramble. Each person I talked to had the same reaction. Shock, then anger, then a kind of dawning realization that maybe Rachel wasn't quite who they thought she was. "Has she done stuff like this before?" Maya asked during our second coffee meeting. I'm trying to think if there were other times. That was the question that unlocked something. Once people started looking, they started seeing. Chelsea. One of Rachel's work friends who had gotten to know through various hangouts admitted that Rachel had once taken credit for Chelsea's presentation at their company and then acted confused when Chelsea confronted her about it. Another friend, James, remembered Rachel borrowing $500 for an emergency 2 years ago and then posting Instagram photos from a weekend spa trip the same week. When he'd asked about the money, she'd said she'd forgotten, and then ghosted him until he stopped bringing it up. The pattern wasn't just with me. It was everywhere. Rachel made excuses, rewrote history, and relied on people being too uncomfortable to call her out. But I wasn't going to call her out. Not directly. Not in a way she could spin or dismiss or turn back on me. I was going to let her choices speak for themselves. By day 8 before the wedding, I had everything I needed. Documentation of every expense. Screenshots of every conversation. Witness statements from 5 people willing to confirm what Rachel had told them versus what had actually happened. The email from the client I'd turned down. The group chat where she'd mocked me. I created a simple, clean document. No anger, no accusations, just facts, dates, screenshots, and numbers. A timeline that anyone could follow. At the top, I wrote a single sentence. A case study in why professional photographers don't work for free, even for friends. I didn't plan to post it publicly. Not yet. That would make me look petty, vindictive, like I was airing dirty laundry for revenge. No, I had a better idea. One that would let Rachel's own actions do all the talking. I called the venue where the wedding was being held. "Hi, this is Nadia Osman," I said in my most professional voice. "I'm the maid of honor for the Carter Williams wedding on June 14th. I wanted to confirm something about the photography timeline." The coordinator, a cheerful woman named Beth, pulled up the file. "Sure. What do you need?" "The photographer they hired, Claire Donovan, has she been in touch about the schedule?" "Oh yes," Beth said. "She was here last week for a walkthrough." "Super professional. She mentioned she's working with the timeline you created originally." My stomach flipped. "She is?" "Yeah, Rachel forwarded her your shot list and schedule. Claire said it was really thorough, and she was just going to build on what you'd already planned." So Rachel had taken my work, the hours I'd spent scouting and planning, and just handed it over to the photographer she'd hired to replace me. Without credit, without asking. Without even telling me. "That's great," I managed. "Thanks for confirming." I added that to the document. Called it intellectual property theft in the most professional language possible. The wedding was in 6 days. I still hadn't decided exactly how I was going to play this, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to show up drunk and give a bitter speech. I wasn't going to sabotage her special day in any obvious dramatic way that would make me the villain. I was going to show up. I was going to smile. I was going to be the perfect maid of honor. And then, at exactly the right moment, I was going to let the truth do what truth does best. It doesn't scream. It doesn't have to. It just sits there, undeniable, until everyone else catches up. Have you ever been in a position where someone wronged you, but you knew that if you reacted emotionally, you'd be the one who looked crazy? Where the only way to win was to stay calm, document everything, and wait for the perfect moment to let their own actions speak for themselves. That's where I was. And I'd never felt more certain of anything in my life. The night before the wedding, I got a text from Rachel. "Hey, so excited for tomorrow. Thank you for everything you've done. You're seriously the best Mo ever. Love you." I stared at the message for a long time. 3 months ago, it would have made me feel warm and appreciated. Now it just felt like another manipulation. Another way to keep me invested, compliant, grateful for scraps of affection. I typed back, "Can't wait. See you tomorrow." Short, neutral, giving nothing away. Because tomorrow, Rachel was going to get exactly what she'd asked for all along. A perfect maid of honor who documented everything. And sometimes, the most devastating thing you can do to someone isn't revenge. It's just letting everyone see who they really are. The morning of June 14th arrived with a kind of perfect Seattle summer weather that makes you forget about 9 months of rain. Clear skies, 72 degrees, a light breeze coming off the sound. The kind of day Rachel had probably dreamed about since she was a little girl playing dress-up in her mom's closet. I woke up at 6 a.m., fed Cisco, and went for a run along the Burt Gilman Trail. I needed to clear my head, to make sure I was completely calm and focused for what was coming. By the time I got back to my apartment, showered, and started getting ready, I felt steady. Cold maybe, but steady. My bridesmaid dress hung on the back of my closet door. Dusty rose, floor length, with delicate lace sleeves that Rachel had insisted were romantic and timeless. I'd spent $310 on it plus another $75 in alterations to make it fit right. I put it on, did my makeup carefully, and styled my hair in the loose waves Rachel had requested for all her bridesmaids. Looking in the mirror, I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be. The supportive best friend. The reliable maid of honor. The person who showed up and smiled and made everything perfect. I grabbed my phone and the small clutch I'd prepared the night before. Inside, my ID, some cash, lipstick, and a single USB drive smaller than my thumb. Everything I needed. The wedding was at a barn venue in Snohomish County, about 40 minutes north of Seattle. I'd driven the route 3 times while scouting for the photos I thought I'd be taking. I knew every turn, every landmark, every place where the light hit the fields just right. I arrived at 10:30, right on schedule. The venue was already bustling with activity. White folding chairs arranged in perfect rows facing a wooden arch wrapped in greenery and white roses. String lights hung between the barn beams, even though they wouldn't be lit until evening. A catering team setting up tables. And Claire Donovan, the photographer Rachel had hired, directing her assistant as they positioned equipment. Claire was good. I could tell just from watching her work for 30 seconds. She moved with the kind of efficient confidence that comes from shooting hundreds of weddings. She knew her angles, her light, her timing. She was using my shot list, my schedule, my scouting notes. I walked past her without making eye contact and headed to the bridal suite, a converted hayloft with exposed beams and big windows overlooking the property. Rachel was already there, surrounded by her mother, her sister, and the other 3 bridesmaids. She was in a white robe, her hair in curlers, a mimosa in one hand and her phone in the other. "Nadia!" she shrieked when she saw me, jumping up to hug me. "You're here!" "Oh my God, you look amazing." She smelled like expensive champagne and the perfume she always wore, something floral and a little too sweet. For a second, hugging her, I felt a twinge of something that might have been sadness. This was my best friend. 12 years of history. And it was ending today, even if she didn't know it yet. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, pulling back with a smile. "How are you feeling? Terrified? Excited? I don't even know," she laughed. "My stomach is doing flips, is that normal?" "Totally normal," her mother said, appearing with another mimosa. "Drink this. It'll calm your nerves." I spent the next 3 hours doing exactly what a maid of honor does. I bustled around making sure everyone had what they needed. I pinned a bridesmaid's dress when the zipper stuck. I ran to the venue coordinator when Rachel panicked about the centerpieces looking wrong. They looked fine. They knew something was coming. I'd been careful not to tell them what exactly. Just that I wasn't going to make a scene, that I wasn't going to ruin Rachel's day. I'd been honest about that. I wasn't going to ruin anything. Rachel was going to do that all by herself. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel cried during her vows. Derek's voice cracked when he said, "I do." The officiant made a joke that landed well. People laughed in all the right places. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. For those 28 minutes, it was exactly what a wedding should be. Joyful, romantic, full of promise. I stood up front in my dusty rose dress, holding Rachel's bouquet, smiling like I was supposed to. The reception started at 5. Cocktail hour in the courtyard, dinner at 6:30, dancing to follow. I made sure everyone had drinks, that Rachel's grandmother was seated comfortably, that the flower girl didn't spill punch on her dress. Perfect maid of honor. Anticipating needs, solving problems. Invisible until needed. At 6:45, dinner was served. Salmon or chicken, roasted vegetables, a fancy salad with goat cheese and candied walnuts. I'd eaten at enough weddings to know the food was good, but I could barely taste it. My heart was hammering despite my outward calm, because I knew what came next. At 7:15, the best man stood up for his speech. Derek's brother, a guy named Matt, who I'd met twice. He told a funny story about Derek in college, made a toast, everyone clinked glasses. Then the DJ announced, and now the maid of honor, Nadia Osman. I stood up, picked up my champagne glass, smiled at the room of 200 people. "Hi everyone," I said, and my voice carried clearly through the sound system. For those who don't know me, I'm Nadia, and I've had the honor of being Rachel's best friend for 12 years. Rachel beamed at me from the head table, her hand in Derek's. 12 years is a long time, I continued. Long enough to really get to know someone. To see them at their best and their worst. To learn what they value, what they care about, who they really are when the cameras aren't on. A few people chuckled. Standard wedding speech stuff. Rachel asked me to photograph this wedding. I said, my tone still light and friendly. She said she couldn't imagine anyone else capturing her day. And I was honored. So honored that I turned down an $8,500 job with another client to make sure I'd be available. I saw Rachel's smile flicker. Just a little. The first crack. I spent hours scouting this venue, creating shot lists, planning the perfect timeline to capture every moment. I paused. And then, 2 weeks ago, Rachel called to tell me she'd hired someone else. The room got very quiet. You could hear the string lights buzzing. Now that's fine, I said quickly, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. Things change. People get better offers. I understand that. What I didn't understand was why, when I ran into friends over the past 2 weeks, they all told me that Rachel had said I was the one who backed out, that I'd double booked myself, that I'd left her scrambling. Rachel's face had gone pale. Nadia, she said, but her microphone wasn't on. I pulled the USB drive from my clutch and held it up. This drive contains screenshots of every conversation Rachel and I had about the wedding. The timeline where she asked me to shoot it for free. My acceptance. The client I turned down. And the call where she told me she'd hired someone else and made it sound like she was doing me a favor. I looked directly at her. It also contains screenshots of a group chat where you told your work friends that I was desperate to be needed. And that getting free photography from me was convenient. Someone gasped. Multiple someones. Derek was staring at Rachel with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe. Or recognition. I'm not telling you this to ruin your day, I said, and I meant it. I'm telling you because for 12 years I made excuses for you. I convinced myself that the way you minimized my accomplishments was just honesty. That the way you borrowed money and never paid it back was just forgetfulness. That the way you asked for favors and then rewrote history was just miscommunication. My hands weren't shaking. My voice was steady. But the truth is, Rachel, you've been using me for years. Using my loyalty, my work, my money, my time. And banking on the fact that I'd never call you out because that's not what best friends do. Rachel stood up. This is insane, she said, her voice high and shaky. You're seriously doing this at my wedding? Making up lies because you're jealous? I'm not making anything up, I said calmly. Everything I've said is documented. Dates, screenshots, bank statements, witnesses. All on this drive. I set it down on the table. You told people I flaked on you. That damaged my professional reputation. In my industry, that costs real money. So I documented everything. Not for revenge. Just for protection. Rachel's mother stood up. You ungrateful little. Mom, don't, Rachel said, grabbing her arm. But her voice cracked. I looked around the room. At the faces staring back at me. Some shocked. Some confused. Some, like Maya and James, nodding slowly like pieces were clicking into place. I came here today as your maid of honor, I said. I helped you get ready. I stood beside you during your vows. I did everything you asked. But I won't stand here and let you tell people I'm the one who failed you when we both know that that's not true. I picked up my champagne glass. So here's my toast. To honesty. To knowing your worth. And to the difference between loyalty and letting yourself be used. I drank, set the glass down, and walked out. Behind me, the room erupted. Voices overlapping. People yelling questions. Someone crying. I didn't look back. I walked through the barn, past the string lights and the centerpieces and the cake table, out into the parking lot where the evening air was cool against my flushed skin. My hands started shaking then. Not from fear or regret. From adrenaline, from relief, from the sheer weight of 12 years, finally lifted off my shoulders. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Nadia, wait. I turned. It was Derek. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his bow tie slightly crooked. Is it true? He asked quietly. All of it? Yes. He nodded slowly, looking back at the barn. Inside, I could hear raised voices. Rachel's definitely. Her mother's. Others. She told me you'd bailed, he said. That you'd offered and then canceled. I thought it was weird because she talked about how reliable you were, how you always came through. But she seemed upset about it, so I didn't push. She lied to you too, I said. Probably not the first time. His jaw tightened. Probably not. We stood there for a moment in the parking lot, the sounds of the reception chaos drifting out through the open barn doors. I'm sorry, I said. I know this is your wedding day. Don't apologize, he said. If what you said is true, and I'm guessing it is, then I needed to know. He paused. Did you mean it? About having documentation? I pulled out my phone, opened my encrypted files app, and showed him. Screenshots, emails, bank statements, the group chat, witness statements from 5 people. He read for a minute, his expression getting darker with each swipe. Jesus, he whispered. I wasn't going to show anyone unless she tried to destroy my reputation further, I said, but she did. So here we are. Derek handed my phone back. She's going to say you ruined her wedding. I know. You okay with that? I thought about it. About 12 years of making myself smaller, of swallowing hurt, of accepting crumbs of affection as if they were full meals. Yeah, I said. I am. He nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he held out his hand. Thank you for telling me the truth. I shook it. Good luck in there. I'm going to need it, he said with a bitter laugh. As I drove away, I saw Rachel in my rearview mirror, standing in the barn doorway in her white dress, backlit by string lights, her mother and sister on either side. She looked beautiful, devastated, furious. She looked like someone whose carefully constructed image had just shattered in front of everyone who mattered. And I felt nothing but relief. Because the truth was finally out there, and it didn't need me to defend it anymore. It spoke for itself. If someone you trusted had spent years rewriting your shared history to make themselves look better and you look worse, and you finally had the chance to set the record straight in front of everyone, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you speak up, knowing it would burn that bridge forever but finally free you from the weight of their lies? I chose freedom, and I'd never felt lighter. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to Golden Gardens Park and sat on the beach watching the sun sink toward the Olympic Mountains, turning the water gold and pink. Cisco was with my neighbor, my phone was on silent, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. The adrenaline from the speech had faded, leaving behind something quieter. Not regret, exactly. More like the strange, hollow feeling you get after finally setting down something heavy you've been carrying for too long. Your shoulders ache from the absence of weight. I'd done it. I'd told the truth in front of 200 people. I'd handed Derek evidence that his new wife had lied to him, to me, to everyone. I'd walked away from 12 years of friendship in the most public, irreversible way possible. And I felt okay. Better than okay. Actually, my phone had been buzzing nonstop in my bag. I'd been ignoring it, but curiosity finally got the better of me. I pulled it out and saw 63 notifications. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, Instagram DMs, even a few emails. I scrolled through the texts first. Maya, oh my God, are you okay? Where are you? James, That was the most intense thing I've ever seen at a wedding. Proud of you. Chelsea, Rachel's work friend. I just left. Rachel is losing it. Her mom is screaming at everyone. Derek locked himself in the bathroom. This is insane. Unknown number. This is Derek's brother Matt. Just wanted to say I believe you. Rachel tried to get my girlfriend to lend her $2,000 last month and got weird when she said no. Starting to make sense now. There were a dozen more in the same vein. People I talked to. People I barely knew. Even a few of Rachel's relatives saying things like, I always thought something was off about how she talked about you, and you didn't deserve to be treated that way. Then there were the other messages. The ones I'd expected. Rachel's mom. You are a disgusting, ungrateful person. After everything Rachel has done for you. You're dead to this family. Rachel's sister. I hope you're happy. You ruined the most important day of her life because you're jealous and petty. And finally, Rachel herself. 5 texts, each one angrier than the last. Rachel, how could you do this to me? Rachel, you humiliated me in front of everyone I love, Rachel. Everything I said was taken out of context, and you know it. Rachel, you're a liar, and everyone is going to know it, Rachel. I will destroy you for this. I read them all once. Then I took screenshots and added them to my evidence folder, right next to everything else. Then I blocked her number. I spent that night at home with Cisco, eating leftover Thai food and watching a movie I'd seen 100 times. Comfort food, comfort entertainment, comfort routine. Around midnight, Maya called. Are you alive? She asked when I picked up. Very much so. Good, because half of Seattle seems to think you either died or went into witness protection. I could hear the smile in her voice. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. I wasn't trying to be badass, I said. I was just tired of being quiet. Well, for what it's worth, you weren't the only one who walked out. About 20 people left right after you did. Including me and James. We couldn't stay after that. I sat up straighter. 20 people? At least. Once you left, Rachel completely melted down. She started screaming at her mom. Her mom started screaming at Derek. Derek's family started defending him. It was chaos. The DJ literally didn't know what to do, so he just kept playing music while people argued. It was like a Jerry Springer episode in formal wear. Despite everything, I laughed. I couldn't help it. Rachel tried to get people to stay, Maya continued. She kept saying you were lying, that you'd always been jealous of her, that everything was a misunderstanding. But then Derek's brother stood up and said he'd seen the screenshots on your phone when Derek showed him. And then Chelsea, from Rachel's work, admitted that the group chat you mentioned was real and that she'd been in it. My stomach flipped. Chelsea confirmed it? In front of everyone. She said she felt guilty about it for months, but didn't know how to bring it up. Your speech kind of forced her hand. I leaned back against my couch, processing. I'd expected backlash, accusations, maybe some people believing Rachel's side. I hadn't expected witnesses to volunteer. How did Rachel react to that? I asked. Maya was quiet for a second. She cried. Like really cried. Not pretty wedding tears. Ugly, mascara running, hyperventilating, crying. And then she locked herself in the bridal suite and wouldn't come out. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, something. Instead, I just felt tired. I'm not happy she's hurt, I said quietly. I'm just done being the person she hurts. I know, Maya said gently. And for what it's worth, I think a lot of people finally see that. Over the next week, the fallout continued in waves. Derek called me 3 days after the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. I'm not calling to yell at you, he said immediately. I'm calling to apologize. I was sitting at my desk editing photos from a corporate event, and I had to pause, hands frozen over my keyboard. For what? For not seeing it sooner, he said. For not questioning her story about you backing out. For not noticing the pattern. You've been with her for 2 years, I said. I was with her for 12, and I didn't see it clearly until recently. You don't need to apologize. He exhaled slowly. We're going to counseling, or we're supposed to. Rachel keeps canceling. She says there's nothing to work on, that you just poisoned everyone against her, and if I really loved her, I'd believe her over you. And do you? Another long pause. I saw the screenshots, Nadia. I saw the bank statements. I talked to 5 different people who all confirmed what you said. I want to believe her. She's my wife. But I can't ignore evidence. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'm grateful you told me the truth, even though it was the worst possible timing. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time. I hadn't wanted to blow up Rachel's marriage. That hadn't been the goal. The goal had been to stop her from destroying my reputation, and to finally stop accepting treatment I didn't deserve. But intentions don't control outcomes. And sometimes the truth has collateral damage. The calls and messages continued. Some supportive, some vicious. Rachel's mother left a voicemail threatening legal action for defamation. I forwarded it to allow your friend, who laughed and said, "Truth is an absolute defense." She's got nothing. Rachel's sister sent a long email about how I'd always been jealous of Rachel, how I'd never been happy for her success, how this was just me trying to tear down someone more successful than me. I read it once, then moved it to trash without responding. But there were other messages that meant something. A former college friend I had untalked to in years reached out to say that Rachel had borrowed $800 from her junior year and never paid it back, and that when she'd asked about it, Rachel had told everyone she was being weird about money. Another person said Rachel had taken credit for a group project in a class. They de-shared and let the rest of the team fail when the professor caught on. A third said Rachel had slept with her boyfriend in college and then convinced her it was her fault for not being attentive enough. The pattern went back years, further than I'd known. I'd just been the most recent, most visible target. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from Claire Donovan, the photographer Rachel had hired. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling," she said. "I got your number from the vendor contact list." "It's fine," I said, genuinely curious. "What's up?" "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I had no idea that the timeline and shot list I was working from were yours." Rachel told me she created them herself. When everything blew up at the reception, I started asking questions, and I realized I'd been working with your material without credit. "It's not your fault," I said. "You were hired to do a job. You didn't know." "Still," she said, "it's not how I work. So I wanted to offer you something. I'm putting together a workshop for wedding photographers about client management and red flags. I'd love to have you co-present. Split the fee 50-50. Talk about the importance of contracts, documentation, knowing when to walk away." I blinked. "Seriously? You clearly know how to protect yourself professionally. That's a skill a lot of younger photographers need to learn. What do you say?" I said yes. A month after the wedding, my business had actually grown. Apparently, the photographer who called out her toxic friend at a wedding was a story that traveled. I got 3 new bookings from people who specifically mentioned they'd heard about what happened and respected that I stood up for myself. One potential client said, "If you're willing to walk away from a friendship when you're not being respected, I know you'll walk away from a job if a client tries to take advantage. That tells me you value your work. I want to hire someone who values their work." I also started getting messages from other people in creative industries. Graphic designers, writers, artists, all with similar stories about friends or family who'd asked for free work and then gotten angry when boundaries were set. "You put words to something I've been feeling for years," one person wrote. "That just because you love someone doesn't mean you have to let them devalue what you do." I started a small Instagram series about it. Know Your Worth Wednesdays. Short posts about contracts, setting rates, having hard conversations. The difference between supporting friends and being exploited. It felt good, like turning pain into something useful. Rachel and I never spoke again. I heard through mutual friends that she and Derek were still together but in therapy. That she'd stopped talking to most of her work friends after the group chat came out. That she told her family I was mentally unstable and had made everything up, but that fewer and fewer people believed her. I didn't take pleasure in her isolation, but I didn't feel responsible for it either. She'd made choices. I'd simply stopped protecting her from the consequences. 6 months after the wedding, I was at a coffee shop editing photos when someone slid into the chair across from me. I looked up. It was Rachel. She looked different. Thinner, older somehow. Her hair was shorter. No ring on her finger. "Before you leave," she said quickly, "just give me 5 minutes, please." I should have said no. Should have packed up my laptop and walked out. But there was something in her face that looked like the Rachel I'd known in college. Before the entitlement, before the lies. Something that looked like the friend I'd actually cared about. 5 minutes, I said. She took a breath. Derek and I separated. We're getting divorced. I didn't say anything. He said he couldn't trust me anymore. She continued. That every time he looked at me, he wondered what else I'd lied about. And he was right to wonder. I lied about a lot of things. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you were right. Her voice cracked. About everything. The way I treated you, the way I used you, the way I convinced myself it was okay because you never called me out on it. You were right, and I destroyed my own life because I couldn't admit that. I waited. I'm in therapy now, she said. Real therapy. And my therapist asked me to make a list of people I did hurt and to try to make amends. You're at the top of the list. She pulled an envelope from her bag and set it on the table. Nothing, she said. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect us to be friends again. I just needed you to know that I finally see what I did. And I'm so sorry, Nadia. She stood up. That's it. That's all I came to say. She walked toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, you were the best friend I ever had. And I threw that away because I was too selfish and insecure to see what I had. I hope you find people who treat you the way you deserve to be treated all along. Then she left. I sat there for a long time, staring at the check and the letter. Later that night, I called Maya. Rachel came to see me, I said. And she apologized, gave me money, admitted everything. How do you feel? I thought about it. Sad, not for her exactly. Just sad that it took 12 years and a public explosion for her to finally be honest. Are you going to forgive her? Maya asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It just means I'm not angry anymore. And are you? Angry? I looked around my apartment. At Cisco asleep on his bed. At my camera equipment organized on the shelves. At the calendar on my wall filled with bookings for the next 3 months. At the life I'd built that had nothing to do with being anyone's safety net or punching bag. No, I said, I'm not angry. I'm just free. I deposited the check. I kept the letter, and I moved forward. Because here's what I learned from all of this. You can love someone and still walk away when they hurt you. Loyalty without respect isn't loyalty at all. It's just letting yourself be used with better branding. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone, the thing that actually gives them a chance to grow, is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Rachel needed to lose everything to finally look at herself honestly. I needed to risk everything to finally value myself. We both got what we needed. It just looked nothing like what either of us expected. These days, I'm careful about who I give my time, my energy, and my work to. I have contracts for everything, even with friends. I charge what I'm worth. I document conversations. And when someone shows me who they are, I believe them the first time. My business is thriving. I co-taught that workshop with Claire, and we're planning a second one. I've built friendships with people who respect boundaries, who celebrate my success instead of minimizing it, who understand that no is a complete sentence. And sometimes, late at night when I'm editing photos or walking Cisco along the waterfront, I think about that wedding. About standing in front of 200 people and finally telling the truth. I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because the thing about truth is, it doesn't need permission. It doesn't need perfect timing. It doesn't need everyone to like it. It just needs to be said. So I'll ask you one final question. If standing up for yourself meant losing people who only valued you when you stayed small and quiet, but gaining a life where you could finally breathe and build something real, would you do it? And if you've been the person everyone takes from because you're too kind, too loyal, too afraid of conflict to say no, what would choosing yourself, really choosing yourself, actually look like? For me, it looked like a wedding speech, a USB drive, and a 12-year friendship ending in a barn full of string lights. And it was worth every single word. Our team is dedicated to crafting meaningful, emotionally engaging stories for the channel Ocean Revenge. All stories on this channel are purely fictional and are created to deliver thoughtful lessons and positive educational value to our audience. Each story explores real-life emotions, family dynamics, and personal choices to help viewers reflect on empathy, self-worth, and healthy boundaries. Through fictional storytelling, we aim to encourage emotional growth, resilience, and deeper understanding of human relationships. Our goal is not to promote conflict, but to inspire learning and self-reflection through powerful narratives.